Hi everyone, this is Matt the Farmer. I hope you're all doing well. Today we're in my vineyard and Marco Penitenti is about to arrive so we can have a nice long 360-degree consultation about all the actions to take, divided month by month. In the vineyard, we'll look at everything from treatments to pruning, fertilization to cover crops. In short, a complete 360-degree plan. So I recommend having paper and pen ready and taking good notes to have an up-to-date calendar of every task to do in your vineyard. Before we start, I need to ask you a favor. For 13 years, I've been telling you about every aspect of agriculture. Since I'm sharing this information, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment under the video. This is really important to keep providing free information. It's a small action that truly makes a difference. Thank you very much.
So we're in the vineyard.
We'll go over all the actions to take month by month. Even if it ends up being a bit longer, we'll make sure to clarify everything thoroughly. Of course, between today and tomorrow, we'll go pruning, so they still need to be pruned. We're saying it.
It's one
of the right steps.
Well within the time frame.
So what are we going to do in our vineyard in January?
January, pruning, stripping, and tying. So
let's explain what pruning is. Well, we know pruning, stripping.
Maybe it means taking and pulling all the branches to the ground, so all the branches that aren't needed. So defining what the training system is, which can be cordon, spur pruned, which can be guyot, which can be silvos, depending on the type of vineyard.
As it was, let's say, designed. It has a, let's say, a training system, and we go to prune it, making sure to respect it, right? Exactly.
We respect the chosen training system. We pull all the unnecessary branches down to the ground, cut, and drop them to the ground.
Central, preferably central.
Possibly for shredding. And then we do the tying, which becomes mandatory in certain contexts, in certain training systems. Like the guyot, the spur cordon, it doesn't need.
Of course, it's different if we have vineyards. A bit more historic, a bit older. This is the time when we also act a bit surgically. So in the case of Esca disease, we'll make a video where we show what to do in that situation. Or we go and do not just pruning, but really important cuts. Or if the plant is dead because, well, with a lot of plants in the vineyard, it can happen. We remove the plant and we replace it. A new vine cutting now or later.
In cases like this, where the vineyards are over 30, 40 years old, the ideal would be to dig a nice hole and leave the soil free for a year.
A hole, you mean?
Give me a size. You mean pulling out the vine, making it 50 by 50, 50 by 50.
So a nice big hole.
A hole work, pull out all the roots and leave it to rest for a year.
But you still leave the hole empty, right?
Then maybe I cover it up and leave it there to rest for a year.
No lime, nothing at all, no lime.
Copper can definitely disinfect.
Because they disinfect in case there's something, I leave it there. I replant next November, not December.
In February of the following year.
Of the next year, exactly a year later. Let's say this one is the best.
This would already be the best. If this isn't possible because you want to do it right away, at least do it right after the harvest. I remove the vine that's already dead anyway. I dig the hole and I go to insert or replant the young vines. Around March.
So anyway,
6 months go by, which is still an acceptable minimum standard. So
maybe let's say if you dig holes, either mark them off or cover them right away, because during the year, even a series of jobs like that can definitely be dangerous. So we've done the pruning, we've already positioned the central branches properly, which is important because if they stay underneath, it's harder to reach them later. Anyway, we have a video about pruning, and on the channel there are videos for every training system, all in the link below, so you can go check them out. We said we're gonna do the shredding, right? So we're already gonna remove all the branches we've cut.
That's right, you do it immediately. As soon as the pruning is finished, I shred.
Let's do the tying here as well. For tying, I'll leave you 2 videos. We made 2, one by hand, let's say with machines, with a machine that ties, or with a staple, you could call it that, but that's not correct. No.
Absolutely not to the myth that uses it.
Marco, what can I say? To the cheapest, fastest method? Incredible, yes.
It's an incredible thing. Let's say the ligation. If cold days like these come, now it's better to maybe postpone because the tracks are a bit frozen.
So it means that if I have to go bend this chute, if it's frozen,
it tends to break right at this time of year. Pruning and stripping. Yes, tying if it's not too cold during the warmest hours, otherwise we might move that to February.
Another question I asked, so I could have already done all this work in November or December.
December.
January, February. Let's also include February, which might make sense for those who have a lot to do. Then there's pruning to be done. Maybe you start in December to finish by February.
These are the classic, let's say, winter tasks.
So pruning,
Tying, then fixing the wires and posts, maybe broken ones, broken anchors. So basically we restore the vineyard. After a year of work, okay,
we go check. Like here we noticed that a wire snapped. Now maybe later we'll do maintenance. And another question, what about fertilization? When do we do it?
so if we distinguish January,
February,
now that we see, let's say in this period, who was enriching the fresh organic matter, the age, maybe if it's mature, let's say about 5 or 6 months. All right, the manure by February.
so here too we list the tasks. We have fertilization. So basically with manure,
Those with organic matter can definitely use manure.
otherwise pelletized manure.
Otherwise, pelletized fertilizer. Okay, today there are products that are very effective, and I use the pelletized one, and everything is simpler, plus they are very effective anyway. You still have amino acids that are readily available, activated with enzymes, so these are professional and much more advanced fertilizers compared to 10 or 15 years ago. Those are still slow release, always as a base, so maybe they should also be applied a little later. So March and February, early March.
Another superficial question here. So I spread it with the spreader, let's say, and does it stay on the surface or in the soil?
So I go over with the side fertilizer spreader because that's how we apply the fertilizer.
I have some vineyards on the right and left, at most 50 centimeters, not in the center.
Not here because the roots, even the tap roots, are there. Here basically we end up fertilizing the grass, which we don't need. Obviously, if we manage to work under the row, so we remove the soil, fertilize, and then cover it again, that's the best thing because I bury the fertilizer and it's not just on the surface.
Clear?
That regardless is absolutely the best thing.
You also give me a bit of a dose, of course, here, I don't know. So let's talk about pellets, because after fresh manure, it's a bit...
Maybe the medium pellets are more difficult. Let's say you can buy them anywhere from 300 to 400 kilos per hectare.
Okay, so about 300 to 400 kilos per hectare.
But keep in mind that these aren't chemical fertilizers like urea or ammonium nitrate. So even if we make a mistake of 50 kilos more, it doesn't make any difference. Since nitrogen is kept low, the key is the full dose of phosphorus, potassium, and microelements.
Clear.
So let's not make mistakes here either.
Just fertilization. Let me focus for a moment. And there are always different schools of thought. There are those who say, no, look, the vineyard should take from the soil what is already there, what exists, because that way the wine comes out more genuine, better.
So I always recommend, because a soil analysis is relatively inexpensive,
Okay.
and you get an idea of what's there. Then it's clear that if the soil is very rich, obviously I can do better, and obviously I can go easy with the fertilization. If it's a soil that's already poor in organic matter, low in phosphorus, potassium, and nitrogen, it's obvious that I still have to add something to it.
So in any case, a soil analysis with samples taken at different depths.
To get an idea, and an analysis that's normally valid for 6 or 7 years, okay?
So in any case, a cost of 200 euros, maybe even less,
Because we don't have to go looking for everything imaginable, especially the basics, right?
Let's say the texture.
So the clay, silt, sand, skeleton, macro and micro elements.
Perfect here.
pH, so you're saying every 7 years.
Anyway,
It could be 7 good years to do it right. Excuse me, if someone wants to collect soil samples in a homemade way, they still do it. The important thing is to scrape off the first 10 centimeters of the topsoil, because where there is grass, that's the richest area, and it wouldn't be representative, you know, and you should go down about 40 to 50 centimeters.
another thing, we're still talking about fertilization. We're going to work the soil. For example, I've never worked the soil here, except for the little bit of work they've done, at least between the rows. I think it goes back 6 years ago, 7 years ago. What do? I do it, we do a subsoiling, I go over it with a harrow. This vineyard,
which by now we know quite well, and it's a fairly clayey soil. It retains moisture, so the work under the rows is still a costly job and a bit more complicated compared to maintaining the grass cover, especially in this case, with vines that are also about 50 years old. So they have a very well-developed root system. I feel like telling you that it's worth continuing to go forward to manage the grass like this, and that's it. It's clear that in a new vineyard, working under the rows becomes mandatory because there are no roots, especially considering the constant passing of the tractors anyway. And keep in mind that in a vineyard, in the best case scenario, you make at least 20 passes per row, maybe even 25. Easily, so maybe by alternating rows, one operation like subsoiling or tying would be good to reduce the obvious compaction of the soil by alternating.
so it means that if I do the one on the right, I won't do this one and I'll do it next year.
I'll do it, okay?
Here, I do it at the end of pruning, after shredding, after finishing the work.
These are jobs that still break the roots, so they need to be done during complete dormancy. They should be done in January, December or so.
January is perfect. So here we do a proper soil tillage, but if I wanted to use a classic fixed tooth or slightly flexible harrow just to loosen up,
After fertilizing, the soil tillage we're talking about goes down 5 or 6 centimeters.
okay, so that would also include a real subsoiling.
It's a real treatment then, depending on the soil. How is the subsoiling done? Those that are very silty clay, the soil doesn't move much and stays like that. But if the soil is sandier with sand or stones, you can see that the soil rises completely. And then I finish working it with the rotary harrow and roller, so I redo, let's say, the surface where I pass. If you spread fertilizer, the rotary harrow in a situation like this doesn't work. Maybe the tiller would work better because you still have all the clear grass cover, and so this still needs to be broken up. So still you need a tool that does a bit of heavy work though.
Rotary spader.
A rotary spader, even before doing that. If you decide to do something like this, I subsoil it so that I still go down.
You might even do it in a vineyard like this, just subsoiling or using one tine to improve drainage or not.
Subsoiling even with one tine would be fine.
That should be fine, or just on alternating rows.
Always on alternating rows because I start anyway, or otherwise 2 tines more or less. Where do the wheels pass? That's absolutely the best thing because here I loosen and move exactly where the tractor wheel passed, and I also break up the crust. Radical, of course, so I force the vine to rebuild its root system and to restructure other things.
We're talking about soil tillage, so we're focusing a bit on the soil. Maybe we're getting to it late. Cover crop, I never really worried about, let's say, going out and sowing cover crops anyway. Because honestly, it's a meadow anyway. Let's say I particularly like it. Because even if I didn't go and shred it more than 30 centimeters, in fact, for me, it's very convenient. I lose track of the season. There are variations. It's aesthetically ugly, but it manages it for me. Then with tall vines, let's say the humidity is managed better.
Here's this natural renewal, very clever, very intelligent.
Down over the years.
I'm the first to tell you that it's not even worth breaking it because 30 centimeters is just fine. The cover crop is a completely different concept because it's meant to be buried as green manure to bring back organic matter and produce nitrogen. Fixation. So it's a concept for young vineyards, different even from old vineyards. It's also sown maybe in September.
So a soil, maybe that's not, as we said before, particularly rich, doesn't have such an impressive structure. So I go in with a cover crop.
Can I do a classic white scene? Even a mix, ideally it's better to do it in September rather than in March. So right after the harvest, I work the soil from September to mid-October.
But in that case, would you do deep tillage of the soil and use a rotary harrow, or would you just use the harrow?
In that case, I do light tillage.
So a rotary harrow, maybe combined with a seeder behind with a mixture, and I go.
Either a rotary tiller or spading machine, depending on the soil.
With what we have, it's fine. And in the meantime, we've talked, we've arrived. It's January or February. We're giving ourselves a bit of space.
I would move on to March to understand what to do. March is basically the exact same thing as January and February. meaning between mid-February and mid-March. I do the fertilizing, that's it. After that, I should actually already be done with the pruning, shredding, tying, and fixing the wires. We can also do the wire fixing until the end of March, because the vine isn't in vegetation yet, so I have plenty of time to fix posts, wires, and end posts.
But here I play the contrarian. Also, from our experience, the old rules don't apply anymore. The seasons aren't the same as they used to be. Sometimes in mid-March, the vine starts to grow. Should we talk about some preventive treatment or not?
So seeing the vine sprouting in mid-March would be too early. Yeah, let's say
it didn't happen last year.
But it's clear that if March starts off hot and you start to see the flower buds, then let's say at the beginning of April it sprouts, then anyway, treatments. Let's empirically consider the rule of 310, so 10 degrees, 10 ms of rain, 10 centimeters in length. When I have 67 centimeters in length in the sun antennas, I need to start thinking.
So anyway, you're saying let's be ready. Maybe let's make a note of this in March. The atomizer, the sprayer, and so on.
That's another matter that needs to be ready as well. How should the vineyard be prepared? The machines too, important equipment. The atomizer is the first one. It needs to be ready already.
So
maybe I've taken care of it.
I'd say in a clever way too. If buying fertilizer can be smart, it's better to get it in the summer months when the price is a bit lower, because people don't use it as much. So in January, the price is higher. I know the various sellers might not like it, but we're being a bit clever. In January and February, it's good to already have the sprayer ready. Sprayer, nebulizer, whatever it is, just have it ready, and maybe we can start dealing with things then. Then though, by already buying the first line of products, maybe we can manage to find them.
But I would also say the line of treatment products.
Of course.
Because at least I can already buy the basics of the treatment line. If a vineyard is organic, it's clear that in 90% of cases we use copper and sulfur, so it's pretty easy there. Of course, there is a conventional vineyard where systemic products are also used, but normally they're used around flowering time. I can already set up a product line and start buying anyway by March.
We need to have them at home just in case something happens, you know.
Careful, you need a phytosanitary license, otherwise you can't buy the products. But that's also valid for the use of a calibrated sprayer regardless. And the phytosanitary products must be stored in a proper cabinet according to regulations, not in the cellar.
Let's come for a moment because we're starting to get in, to open up, and so we're getting into the treatments. Mark has already mentioned a series of points. I'll say it myself so there's no conflict of interest. Mark is among the largest organic farmers and contractors on Lake Garda, so he has a lot of experience in this. Of course, you don't just do organic, but you also do conventional for other clients. What we're seeing, even in the latest articles that have come out, is that there's a return to the vineyards from organic to conventional, because organic, as beautiful as it is and as well as it can work in certain years, becomes very difficult. Most importantly, not only due to economic cost, but also its effectiveness. So if we choose any strategy anyway, do we want to go with conventional or organic? The license by now it's mandatory even just to simply buy copper. It's a pyrethrum. I think to go and deal with golden flavescence, which is mandatory, for example, in Lombardy, you need a license. So by now you have the Vineyard, Alivio, or another license. You do it, it doesn't even cost that much, it's valid. And then we can go buy the products and, as Marco said, store them the right way.
There are standard compliant cabinets in all sizes.
For every need,
for every budget, for every vineyard.
So let's take a moment to open it. As you know, I prefer to do, even if technically it's not necessary, the treatment a little earlier. Because I realize that, I don't have empirical data to tell you though. If you manage to treat even just with copper a little earlier, when the bud maybe isn't yet at those 10 cm, one is at 5, another is already at 10, and then
many times it's not underestimated. A wood disease like scoriasis, okay, which you can see very clearly, and that one, by doing an early treatment, even with copper and sulfur, you can stop it. So anyway, when the bud develops, we're at the pink bud stage, And you see a shoot already 1.5 inches long, where inside you can already see the cluster. Okay, you see the cluster, which at that moment is protected by all the fuzz, so it's a bit less susceptible to attack. But even there, a small treatment with copper and sulfur at a low dose. Targeted with the specific nozzles, because clearly we don't go with all the nozzles open, we target it there, it's only beneficial.
And the scoliosis?
Yes, the scoliosis, the
Scoliosis. Then I mark, let's say, one for an ospora, maybe a question mark, and so on, fungal. Let's go cover it. In short,
managing the vineyard compared to other crops, if you want, is actually quite easy. Because the 2 to 3 diseases, when I do the treatment for downy mildew, I keep treating them completely. And in the first part of the season, we're always talking about downy mildew.
here's what I've seen that can mess things up. Maybe that's not the right word, but it's the rainfall in April and the temperatures. These two factors really make the vineyard explode unexpectedly in just 2 days. You arrive 2 days early, see they're at 3 centimeters, and 2 days later they're at 10 centimeters.
So that's when the crucial point of monitoring and field visits comes into play.
So in April, a visit. Anyway, we have to experience it. Listen, but let's also talk about treatment, because we know that following a fixed schedule is wrong. It's illegal to do treatments that way. I mean, the schedule. It means every week. I do the treatment, but the treatment should be done as needed.
Yes.
So tell me, how can I understand the effectiveness of a treatment? I mean, I did the treatment on April 1st.
Well, look, I would say this. We really divide it between coverage products and systemic products. So that means talking about both organic and conventional vineyards. Coverage products are, in the case of vineyards, copper and sulfur. They're called coverage products because they don't enter the plant's vascular system but stay on the leaf. On the outside, normally with a rainfall of 21 inches, it's called a washing rain. The product gets washed off, so it changes, and from the leaves. So definitely when I apply copper and sulfur treatment and then it rains 21 inch,
It needs to be done.
it needs to be redone the next day, immediately. Immediately, like this, in a very, very empirical way. The same treatment is valid in April and May. For 7-8 days, no more, because it's a protective treatment, meaning I cover what's there after 7-8 days. The vine may have grown by 10 centimeters. That portion of the branch is not covered by copper and sulfur.
So even if there was total toxicity, the vine has grown. So I covered the base, I covered the bottom, but not the top.
Especially because during this period, April and May, it's also possible to have rain for 2 to 3 consecutive days. So I at least need to be sure that I have copper and sulfur on the leaves. So that's another strategy, to follow the weather forecasts. If the forecast warns me that there will be rain for 2-3 days with several millimeters, I treat the vines the day before so the vine is still protected. Then if it rains 30 millimeters, I do the treatment again. But if it only rains a few millimeters, I can wait another 7-8 days.
Of course.
This is the general reasoning for copper, for sulfur. Specifically mention the recognition policies we've developed. Those are called systemic because they enter the sap of the plant and generally speaking are less sensitive to rain.
Because they are inside.
Because they are still inside, so they guarantee me much greater coverage.
It's like when we use a topical ointment, which comes off if we wash our hands, or we take an ingredient that's not so different, but we take it orally so it enters the body. Even if I wash myself, it doesn't come off, right?
Exactly. From this point of view, the coverage lasts much longer. It can even reach 12-14 days, and it's, let's say, more reliable. Because if I treat with the systemic product today and tomorrow it rains 20 millimeters, the day after tomorrow I don't need to treat again.
Here it is. It's exactly in what Marco is saying. That's a bit of the choice I made. I'm doing conventional treatments, and why is that? Because I realized that at first I was enthusiastic about doing everything organic, but in a bad season, when it kept raining, I was doing 30 treatments, and I asked myself in good conscience, what impact does doing 30 copper treatments have on the environment, on the soil, compared to maybe 8-10 systemic treatments, which are definitely more concentrated. They cover more, they make the plant feel better anyway because the plants were actually doing better, and I have a smaller impact.
Actually, I'll tell you that today conventional non-organic companies, for example, start with maybe 2-3 copper treatments. Sulfur, they concentrate the systemic products around the flowering period, which is the most critical moment, and they still finish with clear copper and sulfur.
This is the strategy we used last year.
Exactly, they do 10-12 treatments, and only the central part, which is the one at highest risk, is covered with the products.
That's why we do it, because those who drink the wine, there's no chance that anything remains. No,
I have to follow the withdrawal period on the label.
that's why you need a license. That's why it teaches you how to read. Exactly.
Especially in the case of the last treatments, even copper and sulfur, because if you look at the withdrawal period for copper, it's often almost 30 days of more than one systemic product. So that same copper, I need to know that I have to apply it at least 30 days before the harvest.
Let's clarify another thing. This is also to reassure those who drink the wine. In my opinion, it's also a bad narrative. According to the law, then, it means there are penalties. It's really important. If someone doesn't record, doesn't keep track of what they've done, even in terms of treatments, they don't respect the doses and the deficiencies. So it means within how much time the molecule can disappear or is at practically minimal levels. So basically, there are some heavy interventions as well. Every time we go to the cellar, make wine, we also do some analyses. So we have continuous feedback on what the product is, which still has to be certified before it can be put on sale. When it comes to food safety in Italy, we're in a really strong position. I mean, yes.
Absolutely.
Let's reassure everyone. That's why sometimes a message gets through, maybe the wrong one. Exactly.
Not just the product for sale, but also for personal use.
Of course.
Because maybe someone has a hobby vineyard. I mean, even there, it's about respect, because then I consume it directly from this point of view. Those who sell the products today also provide at least a minimum of consulting, meaning that the action plan is also recommended by those who sell the products. Or is it better to rely on an agronomist anyway, who decides on a treatment plan and keeps things under control?
Perfect. On this, I feel like recommending the agronomist for another reason as well. There are these mysteries of faith, different product brands that have the same active ingredient, the same, the same molecules, the same quantity. They have different withholding periods, possibly due to different registrations. Yes, first time.
Often there are also coformulants that determine the different withholding periods.
So you need to rely on someone who is not only competent, but who actually uses them, because that's the strength. Marco not only tells me the theory, but he uses them sometimes. It can also help to develop a strategy and lower costs, because some products can be expensive too. Well, obviously.
Then again, an agronomist, a technician, doesn't just know the vineyard they're called to, they know the whole area.
The area.
He knows how the season is developing. He knows if it's an easy season or a difficult one. So he can also give advice on the use of products, because systemic ones, in any case, are expensive.
Of course.
And so it also becomes an economic issue.
Let's give some examples. Gianpietro, my friend, in the Parenza vineyard area. Naturally, these are vineyards mainly for production. They have problems with the grapevine moth. I would almost say that in Franciacorta, the grapevine moth is not really a problem. Yes, some people have it, but it's not a problem to worry about. I've never seen it. You can put out some pheromone traps, but we've never done any treatments.
You don't do any treatments?
That's why I say it's useless to do a treatment. Knowing the area, we don't recommend any treatments to do anyway. Also, I repeat, you need a license, and it's better if someone doesn't end up with the product without knowing how to use it. And then,
if we think on an Italian level, there's such a variability of climates that every area has its own issues.
of course,
However, the Ramen Zoff systemic products strategy is the same for everyone.
so we said that this is our management. April, May, there's nothing else to add, right?
Let's move on to June, May. Anyway, we're in the growing season. We have to do all those operations. We start doing the green operations.
Are you saying already in May, mid to late May, or do I already start at the beginning of May?
Because we already do the disbudding, maybe at the end of April, in the areas where the vegetation starts earlier, and then in May. So we do the disbudding. Disbudding means removing the double shoots and deciding the grape load on the canes that will later bear the clusters. Cleaning the curve means going to the head area of the vine to remove all the shoots and all the branches that grow there.
So we've taken care of the vine, we've pruned it. What does it do? Out of great love, it brings out the best in itself. We guide it. Bigly, my girl, it's useless for you to make 50 small bunches. I'm asking you for 18, 20 really high quality ones. This helps us have a wine that's less problematic with the right sugar level, basically sparkling, and above all of high quality.
Let's say this is definitely a judgment on the quality of the bunch, on the overall health of the plant. Why do I remove branches?
So the treatment penetrates better?
The treatment penetrates better. And also something that many might not think about or might overlook. The following year when pruning, I have less to cut.
Of course.
So I might have far fewer branches or spend much less time on the surface overall.
Why do we direct it? Well,
because I do the thinning by hand, simply removing, without any tools, branches that are 4 to 2 inches thick.
so it's already May anyway?
Yes.
Absolutely fine for May. Do you have anything else for?
Let's say mid-May, mid-June. We'll do the hairstyles, so we'll get here.
It's mid-May, mid-June. Sorry, can you repeat? What are we doing?
Hairstyle.
Hairstyle. What is it?
The hairstyle, is it all the new branches that grow from the shoot we've left, they grow in a disorderly way. Because the vine is one of 4, the vine is technically a liana. We are the ones who force it into this form of cultivation. So we simply have to comb these branches and close them inside the wires so that the trellis is formed. In the case of Guyot, in the case of spur cordon, in the case of Aketo,
So this is basically a manual operation,
mandatory for these training systems.
and sometimes we do another crushing or combing. We do it once or twice.
At least a couple of times.
It may need to be redone due to nature, since not all of them grow.
Maybe not right away. Not all of them grow right away. And anyway, after 30-16 inches, they start to bend or they're weak. So they still need to be placed on the wires.
Do it, because one year I didn't do it right. I had some branches sticking out, the cluster formed, and sometimes I would even break it. So this helped. Another thing. Here we can insert, let's say mid-May, mid-June. Start, if necessary, to fight with, let's say, conventional products, let's say broad spectrum ones. And as we said before, that is, if we split our copper sulfur treatments, let's say ideally April, early May, let's say mid-May, mid-June, or the whole of June. Go all in so we can finish by the end of the month.
Of May and the month of June, at least until the 15th or 20th of June. These are the key months for protection. So that's the time when, if we want to use systemic products, we have to use them. Basically, the critical period, if we want to refer to it in terms of plant growth, starts just before flowering and lasts until just before the cluster closes.
We're basically at the end of June, right?
Something like that.
More or less ideally.
Exactly.
Generally by the end of June, we should almost be fine. I say almost, with downy mildew.
If we make it to the end of June clean, without problems of downy mildew on the leaves and the bunches, that's 80% of the work with downy mildew. We have to keep treating for powdery mildew at least until mid-July.
Mid-July, early August.
At least for sure.
So, let's remember if we're in Lombardy, because it's a big problem. The Lombardy regulations require it. Usually after that, there's the notice. Around the end of June, we know we have golden flavescence. There are 2 treatments to be done, as they say.
2 treatments. It depends on the severity.
But they are required by law. So does that mean that you private citizens also have to take care of it? Because there could be hefty fines.
It also applies to V&E too.
It also applies to Veneto. So unfortunately, it applies there too. It's spreading, yes.
It's already been done in Veneto for several years.
Okay, so this needs to be said because a few years ago, with this coordinated effort, we had almost managed to eradicate it in Lombardy. It's an insect, it's a little moth, yes.
It's the leafhopper that, with its bites, then injects.
Let's say the golden flavescence. Afterwards, unfortunately, the treatments were relaxed because, we got a bit complacent, and that's how it is.
In the case of Lombardy, the regional service already monitors sample vineyards in the spring, let's say, the trend.
So
We are testing it
to record
of the flight paths, so every year during that period, mandatory bulletins are then issued.
here,
It leads to the death of the vineyard, both for commercial vineyards and hobby vineyards. Yes, it applies to all vineyards.
and it leads to the death of the plant. Yes,
It causes the plant to die. Yes, yes, yes.
within 2 years. So it's in the interest
And it can be transmitted to others.
to others, of course. That's why it needs to be done at a certain level.
Some varieties, like Chardonnay, are extremely sensitive.
Of course, so whole idea, careful, I'll make a note of it. Let's still provide information even about this. We said that we're in mid-June, we're almost at the end of June, and then we start with July. Let's say July is kind of the month for powdery mildew. Ideally mid-June, July, August, early August.
We continue with our usual treatments because every time we treat, we cover both downy mildew and also powdery mildew together. It's clear that when we get to mid-July, downy mildew is almost finished, so we have to consider the temperature.
Right? Yes.
We need to focus more on the issue of powdery mildew and on the issue of botrytis. Here comes the third disease.
Let's go back to powdery mildew because I noticed in the plan you made for me last year that especially in July, you really had me increase it a lot. The sulfur was for the powdery mildew, right? Yes.
It was for it.
To have greater coverage, so the use of copper had decreased anyway, so even there you see how it had balanced me out and it had increased powdery mildew sulfur.
Powdery mildew sulfur. There are systemic products even for powdery mildew that should be applied around flowering, together with the systemic products for downy mildew.
Here's something we mentioned that's interesting. If something happens like 2 years ago, I made a mistake with a treatment because it started to rain heavily with downpours of 50 min a day. I have to treat, but I physically can't get into the field because it was all mud and the tractor would sink. At that moment, I don't treat and I get downy mildew. Copper and sulfur aren't curative anyway, meaning they just protect me. In that case, conventional methods allow me, in extreme situations, like if I have pneumonia, to have products that can actually cure.
That's the advantage of conventional methods. Because just the fact that I can treat and be almost certain that for 8 to 10 days, regardless of the rain, I don't have to treat again, already helps a lot. In addition, they also have a much greater ability for retroactivity or sanitization compared to copper. So if downy mildew shows up with copper, it becomes really complicated to get rid of it. Usually, I lose about 20–30% of my production before I can stop it. Whereas with conventional systemic products, I might not even have any damage at all.
See, and this isn't just about production, because I noticed that the times I went organic and got downy mildew, the plants took almost a year to recover. Because, well, let's think about it for ourselves. If we have pneumonia and we don't treat it, maybe it goes away, maybe it doesn't, but it might leave scars, basically. We end up visibly affected.
All this, from my point of view, doesn't mean criticizing organic farming.
Of course.
It means that organic farming must be done consciously, on land that allows it,
Of course.
or in areas that allow it.
I think that during the year of the drought, I have to say I did everything organically and I was very satisfied because since it wasn't raining, the weather was great anyway, and I only had to treat every 15 days. You go in with a bit of copper, a bit of sulfur, but if you get a very rainy season, I want to have all the tools to make sure my vineyard is healthy, to have a good yield, and to bring home enough profit to make a living, right?
Let's say it's in conditions of high humidity, heavy rains, so the regions of northern Italy,
Of course.
maybe from central Italy, because I have some friends in Sardinia, in Calabria, in Sicily. They do 3–4 copper treatments because the weather conditions there are really amazing.
I've seen under Mount Etna.
There, sulfur isn't needed because your vineyard is almost in a pit. The humidity stagnates. When it rains, it still stays. Sometimes even a little fog forms. We haven't talked about leaf wetness, which is fundamental. So wet leaves, sometimes for hours, even for days. It's clear that there are more unfavorable extreme conditions there.
We mentioned botrytis. In that case, what do we do?
Botrytis, there are treatments, especially both conventional and organic ones. The conventional ones penetrate inside the cluster and you need to treat before the cluster closes. That's the fundamental treatment. Because botrytis develops inside the cluster, right? So it's for prevention.
In any case,
because botrytis develops inside, starting from the rashes and then moves outward. So usually there are two treatments. One before the berries compact the cluster, so there's still space for the treatment to reach and disinfect the rachis. And the second one is before veraison.
At pre-veraison, not pre-closing.
One at pre-closing and
the other at veraison.
At veraison, which is further along.
So let's explain what veraison is so we can move toward August.
Veraison is the color change of the grape berries. So in the case of red grapes from green,
it goes on vacation and gets a tan.
It becomes
red.
It becomes red. In the case of white berries like a Chardonnay, you can feel it by touch because it becomes soft and sugary.
It's August, some vineyards, I'm thinking of Franciacorta, where we need acidity. In mid-August it starts then.
The harvests for sparkling wine bases and early vineyards begin, let's say, in mid-August. And then the harvest continues calmly until the end of September. For the later grapes,
there you go. Let's always say, so let's say August, September. You always have to check what is written on the product sheet. It's a good rule to stop treatments as indicated anyway. For every product, it's clearly written.
When the ripening starts, that's usually when treatments are enough.
That's enough?
Or targeted treatments are done only on the upper part of the lateral shoots.
For the leaves?
For the leaves, because the leaves that will ripen these clusters are no longer the basal ones, but the upper ones.
So we are going to preserve exactly that.
And there I only use copper.
Anyway, 3 weeks, more or less 3 weeks. So if I harvest at the end of September, of course I don't stop at the beginning of August. No, absolutely not. If I harvest in mid-August, clearly it depends.
It obviously depends on the harvest period.
Clearly harvest. Okay, let's go do our harvest. So let's say August, September. It depends on where we are, what we're doing, and so on and so forth. October, we said that we do cover crops if we want to do them, right? Yes.
The sowing of the cover crop between mid-September and the end of October.
Then October, November?
October, November, nothing. We rest and enjoy our wine.
Yes, because after that we start working in the cellar. Then in December we start with the club. A bit of pruning, yes.
At the end of November, in December, we start with the pruning in a very hands-on way. We let all the leaves fall from the vine. Okay, once the leaves have fallen, because even the yellow leaves on the vine still do a bit of photosynthesis. So it's the ideal time for the vine to accumulate nutrients and reserves. Okay, in fact, in this period, more or less before the leaves fall, you can fertilize with pellets, okay, which helps increase the nutrient reserves during the winter.
Okay, thank you, Marco. I think we've made a big plan, a comprehensive one, which isn't usually there, considering that many people appreciated the plan we made. We've done the cultural project on the olive tree, and today on the vine. We'll leave you an email below to do the same as with the olive tree. And by the way, if you haven't signed up yet, there's still a date available for the course, In the Field with Marco and me on the olive tree. To do the same thing also with the vine, meaning to meet up, put together this agenda together, but also to see it in practice afterwards. We have the good tradition as farmers of always finishing with lunch, well, where we eat, but so maybe we'll send you an email if you're interested. We'll go into the topic. Below are the comments. If you have any questions, write them down. Of course, we'll try to answer as much as possible. There are also all the videos, so make use of them, please. Awareness and knowledge to change the land and make fantastic products. Definitely farmers. See you in the next video. Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.